if you look at the asset prices that have deflated, whether it is mostly now financial assets, but physical assets more. So the wealth effects pun tak ada, the income effects also ada. So actually even after the MCO, which is about 2 months, you lost maybe about 133 billion. It will take a long time because of the wealth and income effects for consumption and investment to come back. So this is going to be somewhat long. So it's not a V lah. It's not even a U, I think. Maybe a flattish U, maybe next year. So this year, quite easily, Bank Negara punya initial forecast based on 2 weeks MCO was half to -2. That's based on 2 weeks, I think. So now easily you can go to maybe about say -10 for 2020, and perhaps slightly better in 2021. So actually we have a very serious, unprecedented sort of crisis, which affects both demand and supply. So I thought the fact that the government needs to do something to help people who needs to be helped for survival purposes, and it goes without saying. But what's important is actually to think about what's the day after lah. What's the world going to be like after this, when things normalize a bit, and therefore do things to take advantage of the growth that might take place afterwards, maybe in the next 12 months or 18 months. So I thought to focus the discussion slightly on, industrial policies that will generate growth and employment, because unemployment can be very bad. So all the undergraduates here, graduates, students here, it will not look very good actually for the next year or two, because apart from affecting poor people, this phenomena will also affect the young more than those older, because I think in terms of job creations, in fact, we have job loss rather than job creation. So we have to think about how to generate growth and generate jobs. So I'll start with that. So maybe to Prof. Aslam, kata apa-apa ke?
Yeah, Prof. Aslam, do you have anything to add?
All right. Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much, Anik and the Economics Council for organizing this, and thank you, Dr. Nungsari, for agreeing. I actually hope that everybody has been keeping up with all the reports about what's going on. I think one of the main challenges that we have when we want to talk about these very uncertain times is the data, the availability of data, and especially for today's talk, I think one of the main challenges is trying to find latest reliable data on how this COVID-19 pandemic has affected the various sectors in Malaysia. I mean, in general, I think we know or get some views that it's the services sectors, especially tourism and F&B, and probably hotel chains, etc., that have been hit the hardest. Manufacturing, I remember listening to somebody presenting. Apparently, the slowdown has not been as bad as they anticipated, and therefore, can this period of crisis allow us to actually revamp or restructure the economy? Why? Because prior to this last 4 months, I think we've all been also clear that there have been some certain structural changes in the economy, and some of it that is not very positive. For example, the share of manufacturing has actually been going down over the last easily 15 years. Only in the last couple of years, apparently there has been a slight increase, right? So if I got some latest figures, it may be around 23%, when it used to be about 30% of the economy. Of course, this has been transferred to the services sector. But if the services sector has been hit relatively badly with this crisis, then it gives us an opportunity to go back and ask what are those areas that we may want to focus on. And maybe just to point out, people have been talking about the agricultural sector, and personally I also feel that this is one of the areas that really should be given attention, especially agriculture that is talking about security, food security, which used to be a major goal, but over the decades has given way to, even if agriculture is being promoted, we're talking about commercial crops. So I don't know whether maybe Dr. Nungsari would like to comment on whether or not this crisis will enable us to go back to the agro industry, but to the food sector. That's one point. And then the other areas that we may think about in terms of industrial sectors, the long-standing debate between whether E&E should continue to be our focus, or should we move over or move on to our resource-based industries, where you have the primary product, the palm oil, or maybe now other crops, and then build industries on them. So E&E, the argument has been that E&E is not really an area that benefits Malaysians as a whole. Yes, we provide jobs, we give them, and these are mainly low-end jobs. And so the idea was to actually talk about resource-based industries. But resource-based industries have other problems. So maybe these two areas, agro industry as one of the areas of our focus, and secondly, in terms of our traditional manufacturing, the E&E versus the resource-based, what are Nungsari's views on maybe this as areas of industry for the future?
Actually, I had a similar on the is possibly in manufacturing and also in agri-food, not agriculture proper, but agri-food. But you see, the thing that has been badly affected, things like oil and gas, things like palm oil, are gone basically, in my view. And then all these tourism-based services sectors, they are heavily capital intensive. They will take a long time to win. So basically, what we saw in the crisis, actually, we saw the disruption of supply chain globally as the main manifestation of the MCO and the limited thing. Like supply chain was disrupted. So that made me recommended, actually, you're right, so actually both manufacturing and agri-food, because it's been so fragmented. The fragmentation of supply chain and then the locating it globally, I think has to consolidate. Instead of having supply chain fragmented globally, I think one of the consequences of this crisis is actually there will be more consolidation, more localization of supply chain, and that's why I think there's an opportunity for us in both manufacturing and agriculture, because in agriculture, you're right, Aslam, actually agri-food is actually more about food security, but in manufacturing it's also about security of supply, because disruption in supply chain. So actually both of them, I agree, should be the focus. Wait, hold on.
Okay, I think Prof. Aslam, do you have anything to add on that while Dr. Nungsari?
Yeah, well, I'm all for the idea of agro-food industry. I think that food security has been something.
It is actually no, but on manufacturing, on E&E, one of the things that has happened macam dekat Penang, actually maybe you guys at the university should be looking at this. Actually, this we already have a base of manufacturing, so we cannot give up macam E&E, furniture, chemicals in chemical industries. So what we need to work on is actually we need to work on linking it to the new supply chain in the region. Actually on all of those things like E&E, furniture, for example, chemicals, biochemicals, oleochemicals. So I think that's one. But food is clearly something that is, I think, that we ought to look at, because food, agri-food actually is actually one big potential, but it has to be technology driven. Like, it cannot be based on this migrant labor and all these things. So those are I'm actually on the National Productivity Council on the agro-food stuff, which is actually we had a thing among us, because actually, I don't know whether you guys know, all the local supply chain for fresh produce were totally disrupted, because when Selayang was disrupted, the whole channel of distribution for agri-produce and fisheries was disrupted. That shows how bad our supply chains are in terms of fresh produce. So those are the things that we need to look at to improve and to put technology into, and to create jobs and growth potential going forward.
So, judging from what you are saying, post-COVID-19 means that we have to sort of reinvigorate where our industries will be heading towards. But what we're looking at right now is that a lot of industries are feeling the burden of the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, the tourism industry, which takes about a quarter of the employment in the economy. Are we saying that navigating towards these industries will be sort of replacing all these odd industries that have been affected heavily by these industries by COVID-19, or are we still sort of looking at retaining these industries while at the same time trying to navigate to the agri-food and more manufacturing sectors?
No, the services side. The services side will come back, but it will take a long time. You know, and I mean, retail will come back, wholesale will come back, even the food and beverages and hospitality related will come back, but it will take a long time. You will go through unemployment bankruptcy period before it comes back, because things will normalize on the demand side until there is a vaccine. Now, even when there is a vaccine, let's say there's a vaccine today, demand will not return to where it was for a while. So actually, it's not about replacing, it's actually about finding new sources of employment, new sources of growth. Actually, that's what we're talking about. But there are some industries like, I think, oil and gas, for example, even palm oil, because the collapse in the price of crude oil have made all this biodiesel, whatever, on palm oil side to be totally not feasible. So all those sectors, I think, will have a real contraction, oil and gas, the non-edible side of palm oil and so on. So that needs to be replaced, actually. I mean, you need to replace the supply side with new things to replace those things. So it's both replacement, but also creating new things to make up for the normalization process that will take place. They will take time. So that's what we mean. But all this normal stuff like retail and restaurants, they will come back, but it's going to take some time. You look at the figures yesterday on unemployment. It's horrible.
3.9%, yes.
Huh?
3.9% for March, I think.
Yeah, so it will get worse, actually. So that's so we have to think of where is growth coming from and where is where are jobs going to come from? So we're talking in that context.
Can I just maybe query Dr. Nungsari? You know, are we able to use this period as a period where we try to restructure? Can we do it? Because, you know, the momentum over the last 40 years has been going in a certain direction. To a certain extent, we have, well, quite a big extent, we have neglected agriculture, especially the food industry. You know, even manufacturing has been kind of, you know, this idea of premature deindustrialization. So we have moved to services as if services is the solution to all our problems. And now this crisis has shown that we need to not only take a step back, but to go to those food areas which we have been neglecting. I mean, you talk about meats, we import, you know, I think except for pork, which we are a net exporter, we are importer of, you know, of beef in big way, etc. How do we, is it possible for us to rebuild those areas that over the last 2-3 decades, you know, we have kind of neglected, and how to go about doing that?
So that, I mean, to use an economic punya jargon, is actually a major distortion that resulted in what you said, which I agree, is actually prices were not fully revealed in a way, especially the distortion in the labor market. The distortion in the labor market does not reveal true labor costs, labor prices. So that basically not just put a drag on wages, but also altered the incentive structure for people to invest in technology or not. So one major driver of transformation towards what you just said is actually to remove the distortion in the labor market, so that pricing of labor, the relative prices of labor, and therefore the share of labor income to total income would change. So this crisis would be an opportunity to drive some of those distortion away, actually, with regard to foreign labor, migrant labor, adoption of replacement of technology, technology replacing people, and so on. That will happen, I think, because actually to fulfill standards, we talk about food, we talk about service level agreement. Increasingly, you have to replace people with technology anyway. Yang kita worry is actually our own people get replaced by technology lah. That's what we worry. But to answer your question, the lobby for things like palm oil and oil and gas is very strong. So that's the reason why we haven't changed, because they're very strong. It's embedded. Right? For example, the biggest owners of some of the biggest owners of plantation companies are also things like PNB dengan tabung haji. So they, it's a self-preservation punya ni. So we preserve the structure of the economy because there are a lot of vested interest in there. So now this is an opportunity where if it's real collapse on oil and gas, for example, then we have to find some other sources of growth. And this is real, you know? Oil and gas. It's a big part of the economy, big part of government revenue, so it's lost. So maybe this is the juncture, the point, the persimpangan jalan, so to speak, that we can actually try to do something towards that. But the lobby against it will be quite strong also lah, to preserve something already bad because it's big. But hopefully something new will happen lah. Especially I'm actually looking at the agri-food and also parts of the supply chain in manufacturing.
It's interesting because if all of you remember, back in October, the government released the new industrial policy direction, and they wanted to implement the IR 4.0 sort of aspect of manufacturing and smart food agriculture could this be the point as to which, you know, that policy be realized in the long run? Or will we be coming across challenges in terms of embracing that IR 4.0 aspect in smart agriculture? Because I mean, from what I can see, there's a big jump between what our farmers can handle and what technology is bring us forward to. So
no, actually, I tell you, I mean, I'm in the National Productivity Council with on agri-food. So my council is actually all these horticulturists, aquaculturists, livestock people, small industry people. Actually, the ones that are around on whether it's horticulture, floriculture, aquaculture, very high tech. Poultry, for example, is very high tech. The ones that are around are very high tech. They are, you know, in terms of usage of technology, they're very high tech. I mean, using all kinds of telecommunications, using technology yang canggih lah actually. So the problem is they are small. They're not big. I mean, we have to increase those things. And there are structural issues there lah. One of the big issues actually is land tenure. See, there is no security of land tenure for people involved in agri-production. Bukan plantation, agri-production. So because the land tenure are very short, so owners are not willing to invest a lot because land tenure is short. Because land tenure, agricultural land tenure in this country is like, I don't know whether you guys know, toll, you know, temporary occupation license, 1 year, 5 years. So it doesn't create the right incentive for them to put real technology into the business because the land tenure is short. So that's one major issue. And then land pula is a state matter rather than a federal matter. So different states have different ruling on that. So that's land. And then the issues about resources like water. And then issues about labor. Because there is this inconsistency in policy. Sometimes foreign labor are allowed, sometimes foreign labor are not allowed. So because of that, that affects investment decision in technology again. So I think if we remove some of these things, then the incentives is there. The capabilities are there. UPM probably gone already in terms of the inherent strength dekat situ, but private sector can solve their problem if some of the major distortions are being resolved. So I think we can go in those areas because Indonesia doesn't have food, you know. It's about 300 million people out there. Even if 10% of the population have 15% with the purchasing power to buy, that's a regional market that we can meet. And Malaysia, from a food production point of view, because our logistics is okay, we are in the middle. So there is a summer, winter, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere supply punya issue that we can straddle. So I think that's a good area to go into, but it must be technology driven lah. Not the.
Dr. Nungsari, can I bring in another dimension? You know, we have a lot of discussion about SMEs, and you know, a huge number of people are working in SMEs, and we know the problems that SMEs are facing. Is that a possible, viable area or group of you know, companies that could be you know, moved into the agro food area? Because as far as I know, if I remember correctly, not a big number of those SMEs are in agriculture area. I mean, most of them are in retail and selling handicrafts and all these kind of things. So is that something? So it could be part of SME policy that we push more people. But you just mentioned that most of these companies are already small, right? So, but is it possible to have a small, is a beautiful agro food, you know, environment in Malaysia?
Yes, because the problem in Malaysia is because we for so long, over 100 years, we've been a plantation economy. So we think in thousands of acres, kan? because kita plantation, we were rubber, we were palm oil. So we think the moment we talk about agriculture, we talk about thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres. So, 20 years ago when FND, not quite 20 years ago lah, when Pak Lah nak buat
agrobusiness.
Kan. So I was working dengan masa tu EPU minister was FND Nawawi. So his thing was actually you need to solve the land problem. So you look at the big landowners. Then who are the big landowners? One of the big landowners is actually Felda. And I was a consultant then, as I was involved in engaging Felda and so on. But the plantation people cannot think agriculture. They think in terms of hundreds and thousands of acres. So to answer your question, what is possible now is actually, you don't have to think in terms of 10,000, 1,000 acres, hundreds of acres. If the ratio of capital to land, then you plug in a lot of technology. So the ratio of capital to land is very high. On a small piece of land, it is feasible. Now I know this guy dekat Cameron, belah bawah sikit. Dia tanam, he grows flowers, chrysanthemums, this the yellow chrysanthemum in Japan, Japan national flower, and export to Japan. And his thing is only about 5 hectares, and he's an exporting business, but very high tech actually. He uses all kinds of solar sensor, but it's possible. So you're right. I think we have to move away from thinking of agriculture as huge. We're not doing wheat or corn. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about rubber or palm oil. We're talking about food. So it doesn't have to be big. So if you want to talk about agency, it should not Felda. It should have been Felkra, because Felkra is involved in rehabilitation of unproductive land, kan? Pockets of 5 acres, 20 acres, like that. So I think that, and then the side effect of these things actually is you create a rural economy, which actually what we don't have in this country. We don't have rural economy in the rural areas to really generate output. So I agree, we should change perspective to not so much look at land. You see, plantation punya K over L in the production function is very low. Agri-food punya K over L ratio in the production function must be high, much higher. Then it's feasible.
Okay, how big are you expecting we to navigate this food agriculture sector? Because currently agriculture is barely more than at least 10% of employment, and at least lesser than about it's around 7% of our GDP. But with your plans or at least your proposition of making food agriculture at least the spearheading of our post-COVID-19 industries, how big are we expecting for them to absorb employment and also in terms of value creation?
No, you see, I'm going back to what Prof. Aslam was saying lah. We deindustrialized too fast. Deindustrialization means we got out of the business of producing things, and then we went into services thinking that was, actually, agriculture forms the base of production actually at the primary stage. Then you have the growing or whatever, the rearing, then you have the secondary punya stage, and then you have the services. So actually, if you do it right, you have both the primary, secondary, and tertiary punya spillovers, and then it goes all the way to financing, machinery, input, seeds, fertilizers, and it goes all the way to logistics, warehousing, processing. So an economy needs an activity that actually has a long chain, a long value chain. Therefore, you have lots of inputs. If it's just the reason, economies of vintage macam Aslam dengan I ni tak apa setuju dengan E&E is because we know the chain is very short, kan? It's actually just take somebody else's stuff and put it together. But if we do things ourselves, then it creates all kinds of linkages, right? From say seeds, which is very high technology, from feed, which is very high technology, right down to growing, rearing, and then the services around it, and then production, processing, branding, logistics, financial. So it's a very good thing. It's like resource-based industries, furniture. You know, you have from wood to sawmilling, to design, to furniture, to logistics, and so on. So that's the kind of industry the economy needs, because it cuts across the primary, secondary, and also tertiary part of the economy. So you ask me a number, I cannot nila, because the way the input-output table is being constructed, you cannot. It's very difficult to say which part of services is in which part of apa. I mean, if you look at the social input-output table, dia susah nak desegregate because they go into different, the way they construct the matrix is different. But actually, so I don't know how to give you a number on that, but we can actually look at the input-output table. If DOS allows you to look at the the refined one, I think we can pull up and see and map out the whole contribution of agri-food from input right down to distribution. You buatlah research.
Aslam, I don't mind being your research. Okay, I think more of what we're talking about now is sort of where we're sort of looking at where we're heading it. But in terms of implementation, should we be looking at, you know, turning away our GLCs towards focusing their policies towards giving more agricultural-based in the companies incentives, subsidies? For example, you mentioned Felcra and maybe even Felda, but that's probably just one or two. Whereas all the other GLCs and GLICs, their vested interest has been shifted towards, you know, more of the primary and sort of secondary sector companies. So should we be using public policy to implement this whole new concept of the post-COVID-19 industrialization?
But they have to, you think about PNB, for example, PNB, Pelaburan Nasional Berhad, or Tabung Haji, or even EPF for that matter. They've invested in companies that have growth and can give dividends. So they've invested a lot in oil and gas and plantation. All of them, actually. Because the money with Tabung Haji and EPF and PNB are our money, so we would like them to manage it properly. I would rather that they can adjust on their own as fund managers, but we give incentive to existing people who are already in the sectors and people who wants to come in. But rather than kacau the companies, you see. But authorities, yes. Statutory bodies like Felda, Felcra, you know, Pertumbuhan Peladang. I mean, those guys needs to be reformed. They have to do their work better. In fact, you know, pharma and all these things. So they need to do their work better. But the companies, I don't want to disturb them too much, because they let them do the switching on a commercial basis, because basically their performance is, I mean, you would like Tabung Haji, PNB, EPF as fund managers to do the incentivizing lah, not us. But on government entities, statutory bodies per se, yeah, maybe we can do something there. But the problem in agri-food is actually standards, isn't it? Standards. It's not just food security, but food safety, standards. So the problem is we need to raise the bar so that there are standards. HACCP, there are all kinds of global standards. So we need to fulfill those standards. That's one. The other thing is actually financial banks are very wary about all these things, because they don't have instruments to hedge and risk manage funding of agriculture. You know, macam big ones like palm oil, they have future markets. You know, in the US they have, you know, orange juice, other pork bellies, whatever. They have instrument to manage the risk. Here we don't have that. So the model has to be slightly different.
Can I just add, you know, firstly, you know, the earlier question of Anik about getting the GLCs to invest. I mean, Khazanah has a milk product, right? Farm Fresh. I'm a regular customer, yeah, of Farm Fresh. I mean, it's really good. Maybe price a little bit above, but I think it's fine. I mean, we welcome, and I think we can support. We also need young graduates to get into this area. You know, the one thing that this coming year and maybe next year is going to share with the time when I was in university was that it was terrible for employment. Yeah, we had the worst 87. So in Malaysia,
no jobs.
That was really a bad time. And I remember government policy was Siswazah Tani. They came up with all kinds of schemes, yeah, to get our graduates to go into agriculture area. So we need people who are willing to go into this area. So we have to convince them that this is a good area. We have to give the facilities, maybe through SME policy. But we may also need to come to a national consensus where big funds, like you mentioned, PNB, EPF, etc., they need to invest in these areas, even if it means a lower return. So that's going to be quite a tough call, because now itself people are complaining, yeah, you don't get the 7% or the 8%, but we were getting this 7%, 8% in sectors that I don't know how much benefit they did to the country as a whole. So if we move to these agro-food industry areas, is that going to mean a lower return? And can we get the national consensus? It's okay for the next 5 years. Be satisfied if you get 5% or 4% return on your various unit trusts. It's acceptable, and we build those industries because that's our plan. We want to go for this agro-food industry.
That you know, the when I was in Khazanah, I was the overseeing director on the agri-food investment. At that time, because the fund, Khazanah's fund belongs to government. It doesn't belong to subscribers like EPF, PNB, Tabung Haji. So we were able to take the risk at that time. PNB, EPF, Tabung Haji, they will never put their money in risky stuff lah, because like what you say, because they're looking for dividends. So Khazanah put quite a bit of money in agro-food. A lot have failed. The successful ones like you mentioned, Farm Fresh and all these things. Farm Fresh, we put money in 2007 lah. 2007, oh. It was small. In 2007. So now they've grown big. In fact, the whole MCO did not affect them. You know, he's doing over 10,000 transactions a day online. Wow. So actually, so it can be done. And we used to think that dairy can only be done in Sabah, but they did it in Pahang and Johor. So it can be done. So back to this fund, the EPF, Tabung Haji, PNB, and all these things. So basically, this is the thing about change, right? Transformation. You're asking for irrational behavior. You're asking for irrational behavior. Like the rational behavior is to go for returns. The irrational behavior, but change will not happen if you don't have a certain irrationality of change lah. Maknanya you're willing to forego, like what you said, from 7 to 4%, but for a better outcome further along the road. But for managers, it's irrational. Irrational to go for a lower income. But if we are serious about change, we have to behave in that manner. See? Otherwise, we keep on doing more of the same thing, and then we will slowly slide down actually, which is what happened. And then you got incidents like this, then we just crashed down. But I think entities like Khazanah, whose money does not belong to general public, I mean belongs to the government, belongs to the public juga lah, but doesn't belong to subscribers, can do it. But EPF, Tabung Haji, and PNB, they probably have to allocate a small portion of the funds towards doing something like that, new things, you know. That policy can force them. Don't keep putting money in the same bloody thing, and put in something new. And one of the new areas can be among many things, but can also be food. And that one I agree, can be done.
Okay.
SMEs.
Okay, so seeing that we have about roughly 10 to 15 minutes left, there's a question on the box actually. They're asking, you know, what are the well-beings of the airline industry post COVID-19? Are we expecting a new norm? Of course, this is a very different nuance to the whole argument, but I think while we're at it, are we expecting the airline industry to sort of navigate itself?
Putting my previous hat as the former
NAVCOM,
chairman of NAVCOM, I think one industry that is totally decimated by COVID is actually the airlines industry now. But for the last, I don't know, 2-3 decades, we've seen the airlines industry being driven by a supply side. You know, airlines were buying planes like crazy. They were buying planes. They were just flying, buying planes, flying. And then prices drop, but the margins are very, very, very small. And when this thing happens, they're dead actually. You see, airlines sell flights next year and take the money now. See, they sell tickets 1 year ahead, 18 months ahead, but they use the money now. And then as long as they manage their cash well, they can buy planes, pay for operation and so on. The moment they cannot sell tomorrow or next month or next year, they're gone. So that's what has happened to airlines. So in Malaysia, there's all this noise about, in Malaysia, to be honest, since I can say this now because I'm no longer the regulator, we are over capacity, okay, in Malaysia. We just have too many airlines, too many airplanes, and too many airplanes coming in. Then this thing happens, then people say, oh, let them merge and all these things. But that raises issues of competition issues, which later on might have some implication on consumer, on prices and so on. So what will happen, I think what should happen before I stood down, so we wrote to the minister and put out a technical paper also to say actually any rationalization, and they will have to be rationalized, all of them are dead right now, all of them are bleeding, must be done in the context of the global restructuring. And then the nation has to be very clear. Malaysia as a country has to be very clear. What is it that we want? Do we want a national airline? And do we want a national airline and so we want a low-cost airline? Or do we want something more generic? Do we want just connectivity, good services, reasonable prices to support the traveling public and also cargo and all these things? So depending on how you pose the question, your answers will be different, right? And kalau you still want a national airline, you want a low-cost airline, then your solution will be very different. But if all you want is good services, good connectivity, reasonable prices, you can obtain those outcomes without having to really own airlines lah. But the rationalization is going to take place, and our rationalization will have to be part of the bigger rationalization. But after this, I think the airline industry will see all the excess capacity that the airlines have committed to will be put aside. I mean, I leave this question on 2 points. AirAsia is the biggest Airbus customer for single-aisle airplanes in the world, presently and supposedly for the next 10 years. Malindo, which belongs to Lion Group, the Lion dekat Indonesia tu, is the biggest Boeing customer in the world for single-aisle airline. So these two airlines have almost 1,000 planes coming into the supply side of the thing. So this thing will just is becoming a mess. But it has to be rationalized. But government has to be very clear what is it that we want policy-wise for people. We want service, or do we want a flag, national carrier? But it's bad.
I mean, given in Singapore's circumstance, I mean, Singapore Airline is of course viewed as a national carrier, and they receive a 13 billion bailout by the company, by the government. Japan as well. I think it was Japan Airlines or ANA that received a government loan from the government.
Yeah.
So, given Malaysia's circumstance, I mean, we have two low cost carriers that have now to carry the big burden of overbuying airplanes in the future, and we have a sort of a national carrier that's being mulled on merging or not. Should we be bailing them out, or are we saying, what, let's just leave them to how they are, and we'll see what happens in a few years' time?
No, we that's why I said we have to the policy. You want to use public funds to bail out private companies. Well, first of all, the government already own one airline. MAS is publicly owned. I mean, public meaning government owned. And then the other airlines are privately owned, but they are public listed companies. So so you want to use public funds. So you have to be sure what is the outcome that you want. You cannot just be about helping sick airlines. You have to use public funds to achieve certain objectives. What are the national objectives? Is it connectivity? Is it services? Is it something more strategic, like having your own airlines? So it's not just about dishing money. Singapore is a bad example, to be honest with you, because Singapore is it's a single airport, single airline city whose whole thing depend on the connectivity to Singapore. Right? So we have to think. In Malaysia, we have to think. We're going to spend hundreds of billions on high-speed rail ECRL MRT LRT double tracking kan. We are connecting the Semenanjung using billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. And then what is it that we want? We want connectivity cool to Kuala Lumpur to Kota Kinabalu, or do we still want every airport in every state, or some state have 2 airports, 3 airports? Do we want that? And then we want connectivity to those airports. At the same time, we want to spend hundreds of billions of ringgit on rail. So we have to think very, very carefully about these things before we spend public funds. And the government doesn't have money to begin with.
It's another separate topic for another day.
Yeah.
Prof. Aslam, do you have what are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, I mean, I was looking at the other question that came out in the chat on the MCO 4th phase. I mean, airlines, I agree. I think it's going to be a very tough next months for decision makers to decide what they're going to do with our airlines. By the way, it's been an issue for close to 10 years now, and I think Malaysia Airlines has been there for a long time. The MCO 4th phase, I think this is the discussion is about opening up versus the health issue, right? And I think that's a very important balance that we need to keep. We've already had a very odd decision about opening up last Monday, which some people thought was a little bit too early. The rationale given was, let's give people time to adjust before the 12th is coming up. Others felt that you should have done the adjustment on the 12th when you announced it, so another 1 week would have made a difference. So definitely the idea is you need to start getting people back to to work and to increase your economic activities, but at the same time maintaining all of this. I think at the end of the day it goes back to balancing the two. Let me just take the case of IIUM. It's a very good example. We are having all these discussions about what's going to happen come June 1st, when the semester was postponed. We were told June 1st, students will come back. We will continue face-to-face lectures and everything is going to be, now we know that
not happening.
It's not going to happen. And now we are thinking of, online for those who have online facilities. But then we have the reality in Malaysia that about, well, it could be 1/3 of our student population don't have access to reliable internet, or for that matter, having a laptop. So what do you do, right? How do you have online lectures when 1/3 may not be able to? So the idea was bring them back to the campus. So let them come back to the campus, and then they can use the campus facilities to facilitate the online lectures. So there is a balance, and this is just a university, which is relatively, just talking about education. What about all those other industries where you have to actually move, and restaurants and etc. So the new normal, the new the social distancing rules that need to be followed, etc. Are we ready for that, right? So and then what happens if further down the line you get into a second cycle curve, another going up? So what happens? Do you again slow down, right? Or do you just take the view that some people, believe in, that this is all a hoax and it's just a flu virus, and actually some people who want to sell vaccines, but people get sick, people are dying. I mean, it's not a straightforward business as usual thing. So what will this fourth phase of MCO be? I think it has to be one that opens up, but I think it's that orderly opening up. I think, and I don't know if anybody can say they have any experience, because as far as I know, we've never been through anything like this. So it's going to be a learning process, right? So take your vitamin C's, wear your mask, keep your distancing if possible. Some of our colleagues in economics, they were showing this photo about, in China, people are using these hats, 1 meter wide hats that keeps everybody away 1 meter. Yeah. How are we going to do that in a large scale? I think that's going to be, a major challenge. Not to mention your religious life, right? Masjid, surau. How do you, which is a very big part of life for many people. How do you live? I think it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a learning experience, and we'll have to face it as we go along.
Okay, we have a question in the comment box. This question is more of a really textbook-oriented definition. So we, with the big sum of debt that we're facing right now, or supposedly the big sum of debt that we're facing right now, should we go for discretionary or expansionary fiscal policy when it comes to post-MCO? Our taxation policies. Should we be looking at taxation policies at all, or should we be just, focusing on direct stimulus? So yeah, what are your thoughts? I mean, this is a very, textbook-oriented question. Someone asked it in the box.
Now I can take a shot at that first. I think that the two things, right? The keeping people alive thing should not be seen from the perspective of a fiscal policy. That's why personally I disagree with the use of the word stimulus package ni lah. Tapi dia tukar jadi prihatin package, better lah. But it's not a Keynesian view of trying to make up for loss of demand by doing a counter-cyclical punya fiscal policy. You're trying to make sure people are, all these people yang duduk dekat PPR, all these people who are frontline, who are vulnerable, they actually have food to eat. So that one, there's no issue about that one you do because you have to do. Now
the transfer payment, basically.
Yeah, just transfer saja to keep people alive, right? So but it does have fiscal ramifications lah, fiscal consequences. But beyond that, what we are talking about, the kind of incentive both on the the spending side and on the tax side, it will have consequences. Right now, my worry about this is actually, it's not so much the debt ceiling, the debt ceiling or the level of debt and so on. Actually, you look at the sources of revenue, it has contracted by quite a bit. So we suggest to you that you should borrow. If you look at what Bank Negara been doing, the Monetary Policy Committee last week or Monday, brought interest rate down lower. So clearly, it's time to borrow. The government doesn't have money anyway. But I also read the statement by the MPC. The statement by MPC said something that now Bank Negara accepts banks' fulfillment of the statutory reserve requirement in the form of MGS, Malaysian Government Securities, and the Islamic version like MGI. So then I said, because of that, Bank Negara accept banks' fulfillment of the statutory reserve in the form of MGS. It frees up 50 billion ringgit for banks to lend. But if you read between the lines, what that means actually, the banks are buying MGS lah. Kan? The banks are buying MGS. They are buying MGS because Bank Negara kata, okay lah, you boleh pegang MGS. So what that means, also actually liquidity might be a problem, liquidity, overall supply of money to fund debt might be a problem. That is my big concern. There's no issue that government has to spend, but the issue is how to finance that. How to finance that? There's no issue that you have to borrow. The issue is about liquidity. Whether there is liquidity to buy the sukuk or the bonds that are being issued by government. But there's no issue about government have to spend lah, because you need to keep households alive, and you have to help some of these small businesses to stay afloat. There's no issue about having to spend, being pro-cyclical. Now it's not pro-cyclical, it's purely counter-cyclical. But the issue is how to fund those things. You see, if you look at the 250 billion package, 100 billion is from this controversial about delay delay of 100 billion moratorium on the 6 months. Now, the hoo-ha is because the bank kata, wait, you don't want me to collect 6 months, where's the money? And then, so basically the government asking the bank, you forgo six months of 6 months of interest income lah. That's what I heard, about 3 billion plus 4 billion. Kan? So banks are paying, so that's 100 billion. Another 50 billion are guarantees yang dah jamin tu for businesses. So that one is also just guarantees. But it's the banks yang kena use their internal funds. So basically the real fiscal spend, the real new money, fiscal money spent by Treasury is only about 20 billion, 20-25 billion. So probably need to spend more than that. The issue is actually where to borrow lah, and how to borrow, given the liquidity in the country. That's a bit worrying. I don't know, that's my view.
Aslam? Do you have anything to add on, or?
I don't know, just one point. When you talk about the actual spending coming from the government revenue, it's actually budget 2020, right? That was passed last year. There were already monies that were allocated, and I think quite a bit of it is, transferring, let's say, from tourism ministry to what now it's needed. I think I can't remember the exact figures. That 20, about maybe 5 or 6 may have been that source. And so we are talking about the remaining 15 billion or so, which needs to come from somewhere. So I think part of it, I think that until today is still not clear. And I think maybe the unit that has been established at the Ministry of Finance, the Khazanah, right? I mean, we heard about this in the early days, but it's been very quiet since. I don't know we've not heard much about Laksana in recent times. But I suppose it's the job of Laksana to make sure that all those plans of how to spend that 250 billion and whether it's being spent correctly, it is the job of Laksana to Laksana. They have to make sure that they deliver, right? And we hope that it's going. But I have not heard anything. Maybe Dr. Nungsari knows a little bit more about Laksana, but it's the agency that I think is supposed to be looking at this.
Okay,
To
so
project manage the spending.
okay, sure.
They want to project manage the spending, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so seeing as well, there's no more questions from our audiences, and we're approaching 2 o'clock. I think we'll wrap up with some closing remarks from both of you. I think we'll start with Dr. Nungsari. Just highlight about what are we expecting post COVID-19 on the economy. Wrap.
Hey, I'm doing this because I thought the Economic Council, economic students at UIA, it's a good time for economics. May not be a good time for economic graduates, but a good time for economics as a field to study this, to analyze this. For economic graduate, I'm not so sure yet. but I will end on this. I mean, the question is, I think the manusia ni, the human species ni, we have survived and thrived this long. Maybe somebody upstairs, the creator, kata, you have screwed up the environment so much. I give you a break. But the reason we have survived is because we have adapted, and I think we have to adapt. And I think we will come out of this. We will have suffering, tapi I think we will come out better. I think we have to look at this, the glass half full rather than half empty. That's my closing point. Thanks, Anit.
Okay,
Aslam? Just to add, actually what Dr. Nungsari is saying is exactly true. When times are booming, nobody talks about economics and economists. Everybody goes to the accountants and the marketing people and But when you have a recession, and I'm talking about 98 recession, everybody came to economics and economists to explain what was happening. So it's certainly bad times are good for economists and economics as a discipline. I have to say 98 was also a relatively good time for economics graduates because we were able to do quite the demand was there for economists rather than for some of the other, sister disciplines and areas. Yes, we are going to be having to go through maybe to uncharted waters. But, I really hope this series will continue. Really, our students should think about this period as a learning period. I've tried to remind all students to please keep updated with whatever is going on, and I hope they are doing that. To be able to keep up with all the data and the figures, and to always question. I think the one thing that this time has allowed me, at least, is to do a lot of reading. I think I've done more reading in these last 2 months than for a long time. Seriously, with all the different reports and articles coming out on various things. So it's really a time for us to take stock. And when we start to move to the phase where we open up, I think we just have to learn as we go. Inequality is going to be another issue that we really have to address. And, the black elephant in the cupboard is how many million foreign workers that we have, legal and illegal. I think these are two things that are still going to be there when we come back. So really, these are issues and areas that we need to give attention to. Allah.
Okay then, we've approached almost 2 o'clock. So thank you to both of our speakers for coming today, especially to Dr. Nungsari who made his time to come with us and talk about his idea of the food agriculture and the manufacturing sector and his proponents for that. And of course, to Prof. Aslam for adding his ideas towards that. On behalf of the council, we apologize for any shortfalls, especially towards the technical difficulties. And of course, the earlier issues with Zoom and I'm not sure if all of you saw, but there was some random images that started coming up. Apparently it's to do with security issues. Actually, Zoom has your, what do you call it, your link, and people can access it if they can hack it. So perhaps that's something for us to explore in the future times when we use Zoom. But anyways, exceeded our 45 minutes that Dr. Nungsari actually wanted to do, 1 hour in fact. I hope all of you have gained some insightful knowledge from this, especially towards what we should be heading towards after COVID-19 and where our potential industries are. If you have any further questions or clarifications, you can always ask us, and we can try emailing Dr. Nungsari if he's happy to answer the questions. But of course, thank you again. Stay tuned. We have more talks coming up in the future. Once again, thank you, Dr. Nungsari. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Aslam, kita lama.
Slama was here. Prof. Slama was here just now.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Anik, and the Bachelor Economics Council.
Thank you, Professor Lau. All right. Good afternoon.